Spright is back, and they're seeing some play with some interesting new cards, specifically some of the Melffy cards. Now, this is a pretty unique strategy because it allows you to put up a huge counter to tier limits, which is the Herald of the Arclight. Any monster sent from the hand or main deck to the graveyard is instead banished. And now, considering your deck does basically none of that, you're in a much better position. So the deck basically, it works on a principle very similar to the original Spright strategy. The only real difference is that during your main combo, you're going to be summoning out Melffy of the Forest. Melffy of the Forest will be able to detach a material to grab Melffy Caddy from your deck, add it to your hand, then you continue doing your plays, whatever. That's the end of the turn 1 Melffy cards. Then during the end phase of that turn, Melffy Caddy will special summon itself to the field. Then whenever your opponent normal or special summons a monster, you bounce this card back to hand. Its effect activates to add Penny from your deck to your hand, and then Penny at any point can special summon itself to the field and tune with the caddy that's in your hand to bring out a level 4 synchro. So basically all you really need to do is make sure that during your turn 1 you summon out Melffy of the Forest, search your deck for caddy. Everything else is completely just takes care of itself, and it enables you to summon Herald of the Arclight on top of your other regular Spright plays. So usually you've got Spright, Masquerina, Herald, maybe you've got something else as well. It's a pretty interesting strategy, for sure. It's a big addition, and being able to summon something like this out is a massive boon for the deck. We will be doing a deck profile at the end of the video, so stick around for that. We're going to have some replays, there's some good plays, some bad plays, some really sort of showing off how it works, especially in the matchups like tier limits. And yeah, we're going to see how it works out. So if you're interested in this style of content or anything else that we do, be it streams, highlights, whatever, if that tickles your fancy, subscribe and like the video if you do end up enjoying what you're watching. And let's get into the gameplay. Already getting into game 1 here. We've already got the caddy in hand, so that's one last thing for us to worry about in this game. Don't worry, we will be exploring, of course, the Exceed monster in the coming replays. Playing against tier limits. Most of our games are against tier limits, of course. Bringing out the Nimble Beaver as well as Carrot here, so we can go into our Gigantic Spright. Gigantic Spright, of course, summoning any level 2 from the deck. Out comes Blue. Blue will search for Jet. Jet then can special summon itself to search for the Smasher spell card. Smashers is great against tier limits. We're going into Spright Elf now. Spright Elf gets the revive back any level 2 from the graveyard, so Blue makes its way back, so we can now go into Masquerina, and then during the end phase, the Caddy will summon itself out to the field. Now, Caddy, of course, will be able to help us bring out a Herald of Arclight if everything goes according to plan. They're going to go for Kildo here, discarding Mudora, summoning Kildo. Suddenly their graveyard, our graveyard, sorry, is no longer a resource. Caddy now is going to bounce itself back to hand so we can bring out the Penny. Penny then summoning itself to the field and is going to tune alongside the Melffy Caddy. Now, our Mudora here is going to banish itself in response to our Spright Elf's effect. We knew that that was going to happen, so we sort of just wanted to eat up one of his interruptions sooner rather than later. It didn't really matter. Bringing out the Penny, tuning it with the Caddy in hand to bring out the Herald of the Arclight. Now, unfortunately, our opponent has the kill back here. They did attempt to bounce back the Herald. Very unfortunate we had to get rid of it so early, but ultimately they just had the counterplay. Popping the Kelbeck, though, is something. Kelbeck then going to mill 5 from the top of each player's deck. They're going to hit the Merly as well as Anagito. We're going to go DD Crow on that Merly. That's going to prevent their fusion summon. We, of course, have the Masquerina as well as them having Fairy Tail Snow, banishing 7 cards to bring out the Fairy Tail Snow. That's a big investment for tier. So they're going to really need to make this one count here now. They cannot use Snow's effect to flip anything face down because, well, like monsters can't exist in defense, and the Kara cannot be targeted thanks to Spright Elf. They're going to grab Sulik as well here, normal summoning the Kildo. A lot of level 4s on board, so before they get any fancy ideas, we are going to go into the Avramax. Now, the Avramax is remarkably difficult for tier to deal with. It cannot be targeted and it cannot be destroyed, so the amount of removal options that tier has is limited. One of the big ones, of course, is Zeus, so as long as you're ready for the Zeus, there's not an awful lot they can do. We negated it instead of banishing it because I sort of want to keep the Smashers for a Kitkalos play, and as long as this guy can't attack directly, he's forced to attack Avramax, which would still prevent the summon of Zeus anyway, so the Imperm was perfectly fine. We actually normal summon the Max C, banishing a Swap Frog to bring out the Ronin Totem. so we can go into another Spright Elf. Spright Elf then bringing back another monster from the graveyard, Spright Blue specifically. Mudora, however, is going to be able to prevent that, shuffling back the 2 Spright monsters in our graveyard. A little bit unfortunate, but what can you do? We are going to switch our carrot to attack mode, swinging in here with the Elf. He's going to go Sullick to try and negate the carrot. We're going to use Smashers now. Honestly, we're going to banish the Sullick here because it's going to be just as big a problem as something like Kit Kalos if we allow it to continue. The reason we wanted to do it there is because Sullick sends a monster to the graveyard by card effect upon the negating of the monster. So we can prevent him from negating. That means he doesn't get to send Havness to the graveyard, which means he doesn't get the fusion summon, so on and so forth. So our primary goal, not only were we able to get rid of a Sullick, we were also able to get rid of a fusion summon, or at least prevent one. So depending on what he top decks here, he might not have a play, but the Mad Lad top decks into Tearlament's Rhino Heart. Absolutely, that is a massive thorn in our side here. He does of course have another Keldo to prevent us from utilizing our Spright Elf any further. The Rhino Heart is probably the single best top deck he could have gotten, right? This card is insane, but he is still going to be somewhat limited by the potential of his plays. Shuffling back to bring out the Kit Kalos. Now, like I said, he can go into as much as he wants here off of a single card, but Avramax remains on the field and remains a problem. He's going to bring out the Snow. He's going to Exceed Summon into Dweller. Interesting play. Kit Kalos then is going to send itself to the graveyard to revive the Merly, Mill 5 and Mill 3, sending another 8 cards from their deck to the graveyard. They've got pretty much everything all off of a single Rhino Heart. One card. Kelbeck now and Agito both basically milling 10 cards from the deck, which is insane. Away they all go. Again, our opponent has basically their entire deck at their disposal right now. They're going to go Havness, shuffling back for Rilkalos. But what's he going to do? He can't take out our monsters by battle. If he tries to attack, his attacks are automatically redirected to Avramax. There's no non-targeting bounce option built into the tier archetype. So he's sort of out of options when it comes to dealing with Avramax, a supremely useful tool for dealing with Tearlament. So that was a really good game. He had the top deck of the gods and still couldn't pull out the win. So there you go. Let's get into game 2. Alrighty, into game 2 here. Bit of a different hand here. We do have the Shifter. Now, that would normally be good in a Tearlament matchup, abso-freaking-lutely, but we're not playing against Tearlaments here. This is a slightly different matchup for us. So, we try to go for Jet here. Jet would normally search our deck for a spell or trap card. We unfortunately don't get to. We're going to win the Gigantic Spright now, using its effect to detach material to summon any level 2 monster from the deck, but we get hit with another negate. Very unfortunate. Very, very, very unfortunate. Hopefully, the Shifter can keep us in the game here. But well, ultimately, it really does come down to what our opponent has. They had a ton of hand traps there to keep us at bay. They're going to activate Dimensional Fissure and set a card. Whatever deck they're playing, they did not have any plays, thankfully. Now we deck in the Harpy's Feather Duster, taking out the Fissure, sorry. Now, that's not the hugest deal in the world for us, right? Because we're not uberly reliant upon our graveyard, not like most strategies. So, the Harpy's Feather Duster is nice. It forces him to use the face down card, which is the bigger boon. We go for Gigantic Spright yet again. Gigantic Spright getting negated again, so he doesn't have any plays because he's got so many damn hand traps keeping himself in the game. Gigantic Spright, we're going to wipe out the Sophia. Usually Irene's a one-of in this deck, so we probably should have taken out the Irene, but either way, it just allows us to set up a Zeus. We got 4 materials, which means we've got 2 board wipes. We got a Veiler. DD Crow's not super useful here, so we're not really too reliant upon the DD Crow. We're just trying to set ourselves up in as good a position as possible. Normal summoning the Nimble Beaver. He's going to go for the maximum C here. Now, he's not really drawing into any of his Exo-Sisters, and that's one of the big concerns of that deck, because there's only so many good starter cards in Exo-Sisters. I love the deck, but it definitely has its weaknesses. We don't want to give our opponent any more advantage, any more chances to draw good cards than what they absolutely must. So we're just going to swing with our Beaver, swing with the Zeus, pass turn. Now they're going to go Stella and Ellis. They drew the 2 perfect cards, but unfortunately we have the answer. Even if they did manage to draw something like Marfa last turn, we have another board wipe still available. So ultimately, it wouldn't have mattered. We would have won. And there you go. There's a matchup against Exo-Sisters, showing off the power of Zeus, playing through like, what, 4, 5, 6 hand traps? Incredible. In the game 3. Alrighty, getting into game 3 here, bit of a different, or sorry, bit of a similar hand to the last game actually. Our opponent's going to go for Tearlament Grief. Now, there's not a ton of good Ashe targets in Tearlament, so being able to hit something like Grief is of course a really good start. He does have the Siren though, Siren summoning herself out by pitching Havness as well as milling 3, Havness triggering in the graveyard, shuffling back 2 to summon the Kitkalos. Kitkalos now searching his deck for any Tearlament monster. We're going to hit this with a Veiler. Veiler is really good right now because of Tearlament. Very similar to, it's like a weaker version of Imperm. And it is weaker, but it's similar in its effect because it can completely shut down a Tearlament Kitkalos. Drawing into Spright starter, which is phenomenal. That means we can play through extra interruptions. He ashes our Nimble Beaver. Not a bad ash. I probably would have kept it for Gigantic Spright though in their position. We don't even need to hit it with Call by the Grave because it's not that impactful. We're going to search our deck for Smashers here. Smashers is going to basically banish that Kitkalos for good whenever we're ready to. Gigantic Spright, detaching material, summoning out the Swamp Frog, pitching the Ronin Totem so we can now link off into Spright Elf. Spright Elf now revives the Swamp Frog from the graveyard, triggering its effect to send another Swamp Frog from deck to grave. Now we're going to go Spright Starter, summoning out the blue by paying 1100 life points, and then searching our deck for Spright Red. Now we're going to Exceed Summon into Melffy of the Forest. So Melffy of the Forest, like I mentioned before, will detach a material to search for your Melffy caddy, and that's it. That's your Melffy play setup. Don't need to do anything else. Bang. We're going to bring out the Ronin Totem and the Spright Red, going into the Soul Sweeper. I'm not going to try and pronounce that first word. Detaching material to temporarily banish the Siren. Now we're going to use Smashers to get rid of the Forest and the Kitkalos for good, before swinging in for 14 and 1900 damage respectively. So we have dismantled their access to resources. Being able to banish cards as a quick play effect and then bringing out the caddy for follow-up is incredible. It does, however, rely upon your opponent summoning a monster. This guy, he went straight to end phase. He did not have anything. We completely removed his ability to play the game by banishing the Siren and the Kitkalos. So it sucks to suck. We're going to go in the main phase here, summoning out the Jet. Jet will get hit with Ash Blossom. That's totally fine. We really don't care about that at all. And I think the last remaining card in his hand, yeah, we go Soul Sweeper here. We're going to get rid of Siren. I believe this last card in his hand was Maxi. Summon out the Swamp Frog, and for some reason he waited to use Maxi until now. I'm not sure what he was going for. He would have missed a draw too, which honestly wouldn't have mattered at all. Sending a Swamp Frog, switching the attack position, and just going for game. It's that easy. That's the thing. The deck doesn't, again, it's not typical in regards to the fact that it relies upon a ton of really high attack point monsters. It's just the resource game, it's the picking apart of a board, it's the consistency with which it can bounce back. This deck's just incredible. I am falling back in love with Spright. It would not be a proper deck profile unless we took at least one L. And in this occasion, it is going to be against the Shuja cards. We're going to go for a maximum C here in response to the Medora's activation, which pitched an Agido. Activating Gravekeeper's Trap directly from the deck. Now Agido going to mill 5 from the top of each player's deck. We're not going to allow that to happen. One of the better Ashe targets in the deck. They are, however, going to summon an Agido from their hand. Very interesting. They are under max C, so they do need to bear that in mind. It's possible they're just trying to put up something like Abaguska, just so that they can survive until the following turn. Gravekeeper's Trap pitching Sullik to grab themselves Kelbeck, so they're relying much more heavily upon the Gravekeeper's cards in this game than they are upon the Tearlament cards. Maxi probably put them in a bit of a rough way. They guessed Infinite Permanence, which was a smart move because they needed us to not have Infinite Permanence. Summoning out the Swamp Frog, normal summoning the Beaver. Now we're going to use these two to go into the... yeah, Gravekeeper's Trap's going to keep doing stuff. Ditching a Kelbeck to grab a Kelbeck. I don't know why they did that. Oh, I guess that actually triggers off the Kelbeck's effect. So we're gonna stop that. Cult by the Grave is going to banish the Kelbeck, negating of course this effect, as well as preventing him from using the effect of the one in his hand, which I thought was a worthwhile trade. Of course, Cult by the Grave may have been better saved for some of the Tearlament cards, but I feel like hitting a 2-for-1 there was worth it. Spright Elf bringing back the Swamp Frog, special summoning out blue, activating Spright Starter to bring out red, so we can now link off in the IP Masquerena. Now we're going to end our turn. Unfortunately, we cannot summon anything level or link to, or higher than 2, meaning we can't go into Avramax there and then. And our opponent's just got the Golem. I was so angry when this happened. He's just got Lava Golem. That is insane. going into a 2-material Zeus, ditching the Scream to grab the Keldo, just literally... it's just degenerate. Ditching the Kelbeck, summoning out the Keldo. Kelbeck, of course, is negated from last turn, so he's unable to use its effect to mill. That's both his Kelbecks now in the grave, but he does have Keldo and Mudora at his disposal to start shuffling. Gravekeeper trap grabbing, calling Spright starter, which is interesting. Lava Golem inflicting 1,000 points of damage. We switch to attack position, summoning out the Jet. Zeus sends it all to the graveyard, and there's not really much that can be done about that. Assuming we survive this turn, we might have a play, but Spright don't really have a lot of one-card plays, right? They usually require at least 2, and now, whatever 2 it is incredibly versatile, but they typically need at least 2. Unless you top deck into Beaver or something like that. We are going to DD Crow here, banishing the Havness, but they also have Merly in the grave, so we're not really stopping all that much, and I don't believe it's very long before we realize that this is a losing battle. Yeah, it is indeed. Sometimes you just can't win, but ultimately, the Lava Golem really cooked us. I was not expecting Lava Golem in a Tier Limits matchup. I'm not going to lie. Again, I can't pretend that I was even considering Lava Golem as a possibility, so maybe that's my bad. Maybe he just had the tech and cooked me. Whatever, let's get into the deck profile. One of the great powers and strengths of Spright is the fact that it can play a lot of hand traps. The versatility with which you can choose your hand traps as well as play so goddamn many of them is very important to how the deck functions. So we're going to cover off exactly how we chose to build it. We've got the triple DD Crow because Tier Limits is everywhere and it's sort of generally useful. Primarily just a Tier Limit counter. We've got double Velar. Velar is basically just Diet Imperm, right? Imperm and Velar are both really, really good at the minute. Not because of, their effects do counter a number of the big decks at the minute, right? Flounderies and Tier Limits in particular spring to mind. Being able to negate their Kit Kalos, being able to negate their Will Kalos, being able to negate Rabina and Eaglin, things like that. Velar and Imperm are huge right now. Imperm is better, for sure, but Velar is definitely a close second. So double Velar, play that free, honestly, if you want, because it's not once per turn either. That's another big thing. Like, if you want to be more consistent, you can maybe cut out something like the Duster and play a triple Velar, because it's not once per turn. But it's up to you. Again, I'm just showing you the list as I played it. We got triple Swap Frog and Ronin Toad in a little Toad package here. Swap Frog on summon, not once per turn. On summon will send a level 2 or lower Aqua monster from your deck to the graveyard. So it will send either Ronin Toad initially, that will be your first send, or it will send another Swap Frog. It can also discard a water monster from your hand to special summon itself, which is cool. Basically, the idea is you want to get the Swap Frog, Ronin Toad plus as many Swap Frogs as possible into your graveyard, because Ronin Toad has the effect that lets you banish a frog monster from your graveyard to special summon this guy back to the field, and that is not limited to once per turn. So if you can spam Swap Frog out to the field a bunch of times to send additional copies of itself to the grave, your Ronin Toad will be able to revive itself up to 3 times. Pretty cool. Considering it's all level 2. Again, the whole deck is centered around spammable level 2s. So bear that in mind. We got triple Max C. Not only is Max C busted, of course, everybody knows that, but it's also a level 2 monster. So in this deck, it actually serves as a decent normal summon, because a lot of your Spright cards, which we'll get to in a minute, they all have a common effect where if you control a level or rank 2 monster, you can special summon these cards directly from your hand. So if you normal summon Max C, that means now you can special summon all of your Spright monsters. So we'll get to those in a second, but Max C, broken hand trap, and its level is actually really useful in this match. This deck. Nimble Beaver on normal summon, special summon another level 4 or level 3 or lower Nimble monster from your deck or graveyard. Basically just grabs another level 2, which is amazing for your gigantic Spright, which is amazing for your Spright Elf, being able to just instantly combo into one of your extra deck monsters. Pretty good. It's one of very, very, very few one-card starters in this deck. This deck doesn't have a lot of one-card starters. This is one of them. We've got Melffy Caddy and Melffy Penny. I'm going to talk about these two as a pair here. Melffy Caddy will basically, during the end phase of your turn, is going to special summon itself out from your hand to the field. Then during your opponent's turn, if your opponent normal or special summons a monster, then this card can bounce itself back to the hand to then grab Penny from your deck to your hand. Penny, during the turn on which you return a beast monster from your field to the hand, can, as a quick effect, special summon itself to the field, and then immediately synchro summon using itself, as well as any Melffy monsters in your hand. So Penny will bring itself out and then immediately combine itself with your caddy that's in your hand. These two will go into your Herald of the Arclight or your Merry Melffys, although typically it's Herald of the Arclight. Huge tail of a counter. So these two work as a pair. You can search this card from your extra deck by using the Melffy of the Forest, which we'll get to. So it's searchable, sets up a floodgate, and is all level 2s as well, which works out. We've got our Spright monsters, starting off with Spright Blue. Like I said, they all have the same effect. Blue, Jet, Red, and Carrot all have the ability where if you control a level or rank 2, well, level or rank for Jet and Blue, level or link for Red and Carrot, but either way, it's sort of the same thing, these guys will special summon themselves out to the field from the hand. And when they are special summoned, and bear in mind this is only special summoned, you can't normal summon these monsters for these effects, Spright Blue will search your deck for any Spright monster and add it to your hand, and Spright Jet will search your deck for any spell or trap card and add it to your hand. Spright Red and Carrot are slightly different. They can instead tribute any other level, rank, or link to monster to negate. So Red will tribute a monster to negate a monster effect. Carrot will tribute a monster to negate a spell or a trap card. So these guys are basically the built-in negates, whereas Jet and Blue are your built-in searchers. Then you've got Ash Blossom, double Ash Blossom, pretty good card at the minute. It's not negatively impacted by something like Shifter, which is next. So yep, solid hand trap. Shifter, of course, really powerful hand trap at the minute in a meta dominated by tier elements. You don't exactly love having Shifter in play, however, it hurts your opponent a lot more than it hurts you. So sometimes you just gotta pick your battles. If you can completely handicap a tier limit player by playing Shifter, and it may just win you the game. So bear that in mind. It is an option. You don't have to play it. I know some people don't like playing this card in any deck that doesn't have direct synergy with it, but sometimes you just gotta realize that the impact it has on you versus on your opponent, even if it is a negative impact on you, if it has a significantly more detrimental impact upon your opponent, then usually it's still worth playing. But either way, that's up to you guys. Heartbeat's Feather Duster, generic one of. Called by the Grave, of course, mandatory card to play in this meta. And Cross Out Designator is also a super good one because we're playing so many different damn hand traps. You really don't like getting hit with Imperm, Veiler, or Ash in this deck. You really don't like getting hit with those. So if you have as many ways of stopping those cards as possible, that would be ideal. Cross Out Designator is one of those ways. We got double Spright Starter, special summon any Spright monster from your deck, but you lose life points equal to its attack points. And for the rest of that turn, you cannot summon anything except level, rank, or link to monsters. Now, that's a very common restriction in this deck, so don't be expecting to be able to spam out high level, rank, or link 6. Try saying that 7 times fast. Very often in this deck, at least during your turn. The way the deck is set up is your high level monsters are going to be coming out during your opponent's turn most of the time. So you can work around the restrictions. We got Spright Smashers. This card is honestly amazing. If you wanted to fit like a second one of this card in, I think this card is amazing right now for sure. You could cut something for it, or you could even just play the deck at 41. I think a second copy of Smashers would be amazing. But either way, we were only playing one at the time, and it was still working. So if you only want to play one, be my guest. Basically, it allows you to banish a Spright card from your graveyard or hand. Then you can banish a level 2, level, rank, or link 2 monster on your field, as well as any card on your opponent's field. Plus, it's a quick play spell, meaning you basically just get to quick play banish one of their monsters, which is insane in a lot of matchups right now. It's not really too impactful against Flu, but it's amazing against virtually everything else, right? So absolutely, really good card. And lastly is Imperm. Imperm, one of the better hand traps of the meta. Really powerful card. It's better than Veiler because of a few key things. Number one, Veiler cannot be hit with Veiler can be hit with Call by the Grave. Imperm cannot. Veiler cannot be used under Shifter or Dimensional Fissure because it needs to go to the graveyard, whereas Imperm can. Imperm can be used during your turn as well as capable of being used during the battle phase, whereas effective healer is limited to your opponent's main phase. So there are a number of things that would make Imperm just a better card than Veiler, but both are really good, right? So we run both. But it is worth bearing in mind the restrictions and the differences. Getting into the extra deck, starting off a Herald of the Arclight. This is the card that makes the Melffy cards worth playing. Any monster sent from the main deck or hand to the graveyard is instead banished, completely countering tier limits. It also has the ability where in a pinch you can activate, whenever your opponent activates a card effect, you can tribute this card to negate the activation and destroy it. So pretty much, it's just really solid. So it's a floodgate until you need it to not be a floodgate, and then it's just a regular negate, right? So either way, really useful card. It is a little bit on the soft and squishy side at just 1000 defense, so typically you're going to pair this card up with something like Mech Knight Crusadia Avramax in order to protect it from battle destruction, but other than that, really solid card. The extra negate, of course, gives it versatility against any deck type, so the Floodgate's really good against tier. A lot of people complain that, like, oh, well, what counters tier loses against Flu and Exosister and so on and so forth. The generic negate added onto it gives it utility in all 3 major matchups, so bear that in mind. The Merry Melffys. This card I never used. I don't know if I even really like this card being in here. I wanted to test it out and I never used it. Herald of the Arclight was always just infinitely better. So you can take this card out if you want, if you have something else you want to put in the extra deck. If this card's special summon, you can target a face-up monster in the field, bounce it back to hand. Its other effects can't really be used in this deck, so it's mainly just an on-summon bounce a card. Which is nice. It's not terrible by any means, but it's not nearly as impactful as Herald of the Arclight. I guess it gives you a secondary option if you want to recycle your penny, because again, remember, this deck excels at recycling level 2 monsters, so your penny can always come back for more synchro summoning. But again, it is entirely up to the user of the deck whether or not you want to keep this card. Sky Cavalry Centuria. This is almost exclusively a tool for going into Zeus. It cannot be destroyed by battle so long as it has Exceed material, so the idea is that no matter what, basically, you'll be able to swing this into an opponent's card, even if all their monsters are too strong for you, to bring out your Zeus. It does also have a neat little effect where if it battles a monster, you can detach a material to send the monster back to hand. So if you want to swing this into like a Kit Kalos or something like that, bounce it back to hand, or maybe into like a Real Kalos or Kaleidoheart, you can do that and just bounce it back to hand and then still go into Zeus. Zeus to deal with everything else. Zeus isn't all that good in the tier limit matchup, right? So Centuria being able to return the cards back to hand is a useful little piece of utility. Melffy of the Forest is here exclusively for its first effect. You can detach a material, add a Melffy card from your deck to your hand. This is just going to search your deck for Caddy. On occasion, you might get to use this second effect. If another face-up Melffy you control returns to your hand, target a face-up monster your opponent controls, negate its effects, and it can't attack. You can use that for sure. It's not something you'll use very often, but it will work at the very least once alongside your Caddy's effect that would return itself back to hand to grab your penny. So you can. It's up to you. The Soul Sweeper. This card is pretty decent. Honestly, I was a little bit underwhelmed when I initially read the text, but the more I played with it, the more I liked it. Basically, it just gives you a temporary banish. You banish a card in your opponent's field, and they don't get it back until their next end phase, which is really solid, honestly. 1900 attack, unironically, makes it one of the bigger monsters in the deck, which is interesting, right? It's very different from our normal playstyle. But yeah, this card is a nice little throw-in. It's not mandatory by any means, but if you have an extra deck spot, it's not a bad option. We got the Gigantic Spright. Of course, one of the premier cards of the deck. This card will special summon from your deck any level 2 monster, but for the rest of that turn, you can't special summon anything that isn't level, rank, or link 2, right? So it does have that little restriction, but you can special summon anything from your deck, which is insane. So Gigantic Spright is phenomenal. You can also summon this card using not only 2 level 2s, but you can also use a link 2 monster as a level 2. So a little bit of versatility when it comes to summoning as well. It can't hurt. It's a really good card. We got Downward Magician. exclusively to give your Zeus more material. Don't even worry about this card. You can summon this card on top of any other rank 3 or lower Exceed monster. That's it. Don't worry about the rest of what it does. It's useless. It's purely here to give your Zeus more materials. This card not once per turn. You can detach 2 materials from this card. Everything else on the field, sent to the graveyard. Complete field wipe, sending to the graveyard. So no targeting, no destruction protection stopping you, no banishment, no nothing. It's just sending everything to the graveyard, wipe the board clean except for this guy, and you detach 2 materials to do it. So if you have more than 2 materials, you can do it more than once per turn. Typically you're going to have 4 materials, because you'll take your rank 2, you'll rank that up into your Downward Magician, that's 3, now you'll do Downward Magician into Zeus, that's 4. So you have 4 materials, 2 board wipes, pretty solid. Almirage serves a very, very, very specific purpose in this deck. It basically just allows you to, while it can be summoned in a range of situations, its primary use is alongside Swap Frog. So if the only monster you can summon in your hand is Swap Frog, what you can do is you can normal summon the Swap Frog, that will send Ronin Totem for deck to graveyard, then you can link off the Swap Frog into Almirage, and now you can banish the Swap Frog in your graveyard to summon the Ronin Totem. That will give you the ability to link summon into your Spright Elf. Spright Elf, revive back one of your monsters, your Ronin Totem, let you go in this gigantic Spright, so on and so forth. It basically, this one little card allows you to turn a singular Swap Frog into your gigantic Spright. And this card doesn't have a ton of 1-card starters, so giving yourself an additional 3, it turns Swap Frog from a 2-card starter into a 1-card starter, which is worth it, for sure. Definitely, I think Almirage deserves a place in this deck 100,000,000%. You might not use it a lot, but the situations where you need it, you'll need it, right? Those are the situations where it's the difference between having no plays and having a play you can scrounge together. So absolutely, I think it deserves a spot. IP Masquerena, really, really solid in this deck, more than most, being able to link summon during your opponent's turn into either Unicorn or, more importantly, the Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avramax. Being able to summon it during your opponent's turn means you can subvert the restrictions put in place by Spright Starter and Gigantic Spright, as well as whatever monster that uses this card as material gains an additional effect where it cannot be destroyed by opponent's card effects. So it brings out your big bad and protects it even more than it's already being protected, which is insane. This card can also be revived from the graveyard by the Spright Elf's effect, because it's a link too, which we're going to talk about now. Spright Elf can basically once per turn resurrect a level 2 monster in your graveyard, or if your opponent controls a monster, you can resurrect a rank or link 2 monster instead. Anything it points to cannot be targeted by card effects, so it can provide additional protection to whatever monsters there are on your field pointing to it, but it can basically just revive a monster once per turn as a quick effect during the main phase, meaning it's not just your turn, it can be your opponent's turn too. So you can bring back things like your Masquerena, you can bring back things like your Spright Red or Carrot for additional negates, you can bring back your Jet or your Blue for some additional searching, you can bring back your Caddy. If your Caddy is in the graveyard, you can bring this card back. It's not going to do you a ton of favors with Penny also in your graveyard, but you can do it if you are so inclined. Another big thing is being able to bring back Swap Frog to continue to recycle its Foolish Burial effect is also really, really solid. So yeah, Spright Elf for sure. Really, really good card. Love it. Nightmare Unicorn on summon. Discard a card, spin a card in your opponent's field, back into the deck. Having that versatility there, of course, is really useful. We don't use this card as much as we do in most other decks because we have an even better target for Masquerena, which is the Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avramax. This is the card that patches the holes that Spright normally has, right? Spright has a couple of problems. Number one, its monsters are all super small. They're all small. They can get their ass beat. Number two, it doesn't have a phenomenal way of getting over problematic monsters. And it doesn't really have very good ways of pushing for lethal. So it does have its problems, and Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avramax, to the best of its ability, helps patch those holes. You gain a huge beater. So long as this card's face up, your opponent cannot target it with card effects. They won't be able to destroy it with card effects, thanks to Masquerena, making it supremely difficult to deal with. If they do manage to deal with it against all odds, you shuffle a card on the field back into the deck, so it spins upon actually being sent to the graveyard, which is insane as well. And in terms of the additional battle protection, if it battles any monster that is special summoned, any special summoned monster, this card will gain attack points equal to that monster's attack, which is insane. That means that it basically cannot be destroyed by battle and will be bigger than any monster it attacks. And so long as it's face up, your opponent cannot target any other monster on your field for an attack. So it protects your other smaller monsters. It protects your Herald because they can't attack this. They have to attack Avramax. They can't imperm this. They can't hit it with anything like that. The only outs are like non-targeting negating things like Dark Ruler no more. Nobody's playing Dark Ruler no more. Dark Ruler sucks in the tier. So yeah, this card really solid. I can't talk about. I've loved this card since launch just because of its art alone. But this card is insane. Love it. And that's the deck. I love this deck. Honestly, I didn't expect myself to enjoy playing this quite as much as I did. And this is really good. I plan to continue experimenting with it, seeing if I can improve upon it even further. There are other things that people do, like the end of Anubis. My keyboard is in a really weird angle. People play things like this in the deck. I don't know. I don't really know where they were going with this one, to be honest with you. Its effect is amazing, right? And you can probably sort of cheat it out for a wee tribute summon or something. And there may be something to that I'm not seeing, or I haven't seen in my short amount of testing, so maybe that's something you guys can investigate. Tell me how this card is used in this deck, more so than any other deck, because it seems to me like the only synergy is being able to just, have it in your hand and then special summon something easily for an extra tribute summon, and it doesn't seem worth it to me. But either way, you guys can fill me in down below. If you've got this far into the video and you haven't subscribed yet and you haven't liked the video, what are you doing? Obviously you like what you're seeing, so help a boy out. Subscribe and like the video if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.